meeting at 10:03. Is Paul here? I don't see him.
I should be here. Can you see me all right?
Oh, I got him. I got you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Paul Kears, president and accounted for.
Okay, well, I'm just going to start at 10:03. Opening the meeting, President Bill McGowan, Wayne Sawchuk, Dan Coughlin, Paul Kears, Lisa McGonigal. What I want to do before I say my piece on a few things, I'd like to see if anyone has any comments of the board before we jump into the CJC piece. Wayne, do you have any comments for Paul?
No, I'm all set.
Okay.
No, not currently, no.
Okay. What I would like to do is, because we've been going back and forth, I'd like to make a motion before the board that we develop and submit a sewer connection agreement that would be constituted with the following pieces. One is that we would be putting the connection privilege fee would be calculated as a Title V with periodic adjustments that would cover any increase or changes in the occupancy of the parcels at hand. That we would develop a betterment that would include a 20% deposit that would be payable over 50 years, 20 years, with 50% shared between the ratepayers of the town of Cohasset and the applicant. And I'm going to call a roll call vote, and I'm going to ask the board members so that there's absolute clarity on it, either do yes or no. So I would like a motion to agree this proposal. Do I have someone to second?
Bill, I don't know if we definitely want an agreement, but I think that there are. I just received this morning, and I don't know if you got a copy last week or something from ODH's sort of. In a way, it's not really a recap. It really seems like it's the formation of a new agreement, which does have almost all of what you're asking for now. And it does say that if there's any change in usage, the idea of periodic adjustments, I think if there's any change in usage, it will require an additional fee and stuff like that if the amounts go up. So have you read that?
No, I don't have it.
Okay.
That would have saved me a lot of trouble.
No, it did, because I think the thing to do is you should get a copy right now so that you can.
Who was it received? Was it sent from?
It
was sent from me.
Right, yeah. It's the agreement that mirrors the Jerusalem Road agreement.
Yes, that's the one that was sent, I believe, on Thursday or Friday of last week.
So that Rod is an agreement the town had entered into. I was seeing the format of it had been vetted by your firm at that time.
I believe at that time, but it's obviously a different deal, but the form was.
I think the key thing is what is included. There may be more stuff included in ours, and maybe. I guess the point is, I was somewhat pleased that with what is included, even if a couple of the items that are included, for instance, the idea of a 20% deposit. I think clearly we have to have a deposit, and it's just a matter of is 20% okay with everybody? And it would certainly be okay with me, which would mean that there would be approximately 200 or 250,000 or some amount like that. That would be the down payment of whatever the with what the number is that we're dealing with. And their agreement has a 1.4 something $1 million starting point. It has the 250 as a credit off of it, and it has the $20,000 that the applicant has posted, but we haven't deposited.
So Wayne, just to summarize, does it have everything plus it's asking for another 250,000?
Well, I don't.
So I can jump in on that. So number one, Bill, if you don't have it in front of you, it was part of an email that was sent with a letter that was a 1-paragraph letter last Thursday or Friday, and it was behind the letter. So it wasn't a separate attachment. It was part of the letter.
I can't find it.
And I'm more than happy to shoot it over to you if you'd like to have it in front of you for purposes of this discussion. But as far as the number is concerned, it was the agreed upon number from the last meeting of the 1.4, I believe the board.
Well, we didn't really, we didn't really agree to it. That's what you proposed. So, which is why I made a proposal right now. So.
Okay. I thought that we had achieved consensus on that, but we do need to achieve consensus on that, along with the $250,000. I think that you indicated at the last meeting that had been voted or somehow agreed upon by the board. I know it was
correct, but I'm going to go back to it. That was when we were looking at a $1.8 million connection fee, and that was the number that came out of somewhere, whether it came out of the 250th anniversary of the town, that got us down to the 1.650 number, which then was further lowered because of the Title V. We conceded to the Title V to 1.4. I think it's double dipping. If we go to the 1.4, and I'm okay, I'm fine with it, it's just fine, but I think we're double dipping, giving an affordable housing credit onto this after we've gone from 1.8 million to 1.4 million. Now you want another 2. What are we going to need next week?
Yeah, so I think that it probably makes sense to get the board to kind of, the way I would approach today's meeting is isolate those areas that you indicate, for instance, that you disagree with, and anybody else. Let's take each business point one by one and just vote on each one.
We're going to vote on the whole. Yeah, but I sort of take exception that right from the start, you've been telling us how we should be adjudicating our business. So I agree with you that if you want to go look at whatever the stumbling point, and the only one I see is the additional 250 grand. If everything else, if we agree to the number, and we'll have Dan verify that, if we agree to the deposit, the betterment, the 50% shared, I'm done.
So, but I'd like to hear the rest of the board on this. I think it's fair to give the applicant an affordable housing credit. And I don't view the Title V design flows, which is what is required by your bylaw, to be actually a credit. That's just what it is. And I think you indicated that you had, there was a consensus on that from you. I think you just said it.
No, there was. But again, I'm going to go back to the fact that the consensus was based on a starting point of 1.8 million to bring it down to 1.6. And that was something that Chris Senior asked me to do. So now we're down to 1.4, which I'm fine with, but I think it is double dipping. And it is, and I hope that a lot of our ratepayers are watching this, but I think it's an adverse point for our ratepayers to be looking at the fact we're doing all this. It's a matter of semantics. The credit was my word because I didn't know what else to call it. So we gave it a credit, and again, based on the affordable housing of 250 grand to get the thing down, to get back on track again. That's what that was for.
Bill,
I'd like to make this.
I ask a question and just ask your advice. Is whatever the starting point is, put aside the affordable credit for a minute. We have an upside provision where if it turns out that there's usage in excess of that, then that's all being paid in full. So even if the starting point is 1.4 million, if it turns out to be 1.6 million, it's a 20-year payout betterment. It'll immediately be implemented and dealt with. So without getting into what the starting point is, there is no provision, because I think Rod pointed it out, or someone did before, Medman yourself, is that there isn't and there shouldn't be any provision for a downside adjustment because it probably causes municipal finance problems. So if there's solely an upside provision, then I think that if the starting point's 1.4 million or 1.6 million, we get to the same place anyhow. Do you think that's?
I think I'm not sure we'll get to 1.6. I suspect there'll be something. Let me offer this in the spirit of getting this done, because I do have to leave at 11. What if we were to, okay, so say we call it whatever it is, the 29th credit, 29th of June credit rather than affordable housing credit. So why don't we say the 250,000 and it will be deducted over 20 years at $12,500 per year.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the Title V calculations of the privilege fee that we had. I read Title V. I went through the categories that were listed in the attachment, and I calculated it myself, and it did equal the 1.41, whatever that number was on the Title V. We did vote to give them a credit for the affordable housing piece as a separate element to the town, because the town does get credit for the housing. The applicant has deeded the property for 30 years with the state, and the state will control all of the tenants and the income or rental property for those 5 units that he went above to the 25%, which he didn't have to. So in those discussions, when it came to affordable housing, issuing a credit or basically a credit towards the privilege fee of $250,000. I'm in agreement of issuing that credit and having it apply over the 20 years is fine. It's mathematically it's the same. When I did speak with the town assessor on betterments and how it works, and I've also spoke with the finance director today to let him know that our thoughts were to put some sort of plan together in an agreement that would allow payments over 20 years. So basically, the end result will be the same. You know, if we go with the Title V number, we do the 20 year betterment, if that's what we're calling it, a betterment, with the $250,000 credit. I think we can do that. That 50% share, if anyone hooks up to it, is something that benefits both parties equally. So I would amend your motion through this discussion to add the $250,000 credit over 20 years to equal the payment of the 1.4 over 20 years. I think it's only fair that if you're going to pay us over 20 years, that we give you a credit over 20 years. And I would amend it to include that $250,000 credit over 20 years.
I'm good with that.
So is there any further discussions?
Well, I think the only thing that was holding me back a little bit on the amount, and we're saying, and clearly Exhibit A, refers to what it is. So the only thing I'd like to do is to hear from Dan Coughlin if there's any, if he's in agreement with all of these uses, because that was something that was holding me back when it was a higher amount, and there was some things going back and forth. So I'd like to ask Dan, if our engineer, if he's in agreement that this is a fair, I don't know if it's fair.
Right, so the uses that you're asking about, the uses, because the uses that were listed in that attachment are the uses that we're approving. So any additional uses, Wayne, they would have to come back to the sewer commission if there's changes in use, right? So you're asking them.
Are the numbers here, meaning
Yep.
If there's a restaurant, it's 110 seats at 35 gallons per day. Are these numbers all correct? And in fact, is there a restaurant there is there one or more restaurants there that total 110 seats? So in other words, is Feng Shui 110 seats? And and then of course, if you put and that's the only restaurant, then if you put a new restaurant in, it would refer to that number, and then therefore that number of 3,850 gallons per day would be increased by whatever the number is, right?
In that same existing spot.
No, there used to be a Papagino's there, all right? What if a Papagino's comes back? Does that mean it's now a restaurant and not retail?
Right, but we have a provision where if he has a change of use or an increase, that he would have to come back in front of the sewer commission. So wouldn't that apply?
In addition to that, there's in your sewer regulations, it actually specifically calls out that procedure. I can find the provision, but basically your regulations require that the tax assessor and the building inspector present information to you as it receives it for purposes of calculating the change.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I can find that, but I did incorporate that into the agreement. I apologize for jumping in there. Sorry.
Well, I thought the other part that said that there are, I mean, you have a section that listed, if things are going to be increased.
I do.
Yeah. So I mean, I saw that.
And I just want to make sure when you talk about Exhibit A, Wayne, that you're talking about the Exhibit A that's attached to that agreement that has the calculation of the fee being $1,412,625 with the credit of $250 that's proposed for purposes of this discussion.
Right. It's the one that came with your letter.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So that, and I guess the only thing that I question maybe is, I recall that the supermarket ended up. Is that an actual number, or was that apparently and I heard the discussion last week 2 weeks ago about how supermarkets and stuff are going to change, and and I think that was either a for or against type of argument, but that they're in some cases doing dining in, and they potentially could use their use as a supermarket might change. So I didn't know if that was actually, because it was sort of an odd number, 97 gallons per 1,000 square feet, was that calculated by their usage today? Or was that calculated by what?
That was the calculation of the supermarket that results in 4,723 gallons per day, as shown on the Exhibit A,
Mm-hmm.
is a straight up Title V calculation based on the square footage of the supermarket.
Okay, so but when it was built, it didn't have.
Yeah. The issue was that it was built prior to the Title V design flow standards, and they didn't know what to ascribe to it. So they doubled what they thought it should be. So the system actually could accommodate 7,000 gallons a day. Mm-hmm. The actual amount of water put into that system is less than the Title V design flow that was subsequently implemented, which is what I am going upon, which is what your regulations require, and that is 4,723 gallons a day.
Okay. So can I
I'm not sure if that part's actually, you're just looking at that one winter period? Is that how you derive?
We're looking at I'm looking at the Title V design flow for the supermarket, and as far as the water uses, I think that I had previously indicated the way we view this is because the irrigation system is. We thought that it would be appropriate to use non-irrigation months as a benchmark for actual water usage, but it's irrelevant because the bottom line is that there is a variant in Title V. We are using the Title V design flow numbers, even if the actual flow is less. And that's, I think, Wayne's question, and that's the point.
Yeah, my point is, in an aerial analysis, I looked at 10 years worth of data from the supermarket, and there was one max year that was the max year flow. I took the annual flow for that entire year and multiplied it by 2, and it was actually close to the 7,000 number. So if you look at water use, typically it's, an annualized average over a max year, and then multiply that average by 2. That's another method basically for sewer extension permits to calculate the flow from a facility. So you had a single year where actually the flow was up there. And I realized that at that point in time when they had the, did the design, there wasn't a number for supermarkets that evolved. But from my perspective, a conservative number may be a higher value because of that historical water use. And multiplying the average flow by 2 is a standard method. In terms of Title V, it's supposed to be a max day, and basically that's the DEP's recommendation for calculating a max day. So even though the 97 might work now, based upon more recent years flows, it may not have worked in the entire life of this facility. And in terms of irrigation, you used basically just the winter to spring month when there was no irrigation. You used that for 2 years consecutively recently, and it was relatively low. I would agree with that. But we have no idea how much irrigation flow you actually use. And just from my physical observations, it appears that the whole complex receives a lot more use during the summer periods than it does in the winter periods. So I would suspect that just normal water use, regardless of irrigation, would also increase during those summer months. So I feel you're looking at a very short window or a small window when flows were at their minimum amounts in order to draw your analysis. And based upon my analysis, I think there still is a tendency for the flows to increase above the level they are, as you indicated. And I think it's a pretty high level of certainty that they'll be above that level in some cases. I think one of the steps that we definitely will need to do forward is measurement of your flow leaving the facility, so we can evaluate II as well. And I also think that you need to put your irrigation system on a meter to make this whole issue of contention go away. But to answer Wayne's earlier question, the numbers that are currently presented are based upon a Title V evaluation. I should mention that their previous evaluations had numbers upwards of 21,000. If you recall the early letters from Vertex, based upon different uses. And as I mentioned before, how this facility is marketed and how it is used can vary those uses. As I mentioned the last time we had a meeting, I don't have an objection to using their calculations based upon what they currently anticipate, but I do think it needs to be examined and reevaluated. And I don't think the onus should be on the building department to notify the sewer commission. I think the onus should be on the developer or the owner of the property to notify the commission.
The notification part of it is already in place, so that's not something we can change. That's how the departments are working currently.
Right, but this is basically an agreement you're negotiating with the developer. Because it is a sewer extension outside the district, you can impose any criteria you want in order to basically guarantee you get what you want from the connection and that it's properly managed. So, I mean, you can put that requirement on. We put additional requirements on individual permits all the time, even inside the district. But I really think from the perspective of simplifying the municipal end, I think the onus should be on the developer to notify the sewer commission. That's just my opinion.
But Dan, this is Bill. So using the 1.4 as a starting point, we have an upside adjustment. We'll know immediately what, if any, effect the sprinkler system has on this. So I think we're covered on that. And what you're suggesting is, I think you are in agreement with that. And I think what you're suggesting is that on increases in flow, that the developer be responsible to notify the town?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's working.
Any change in use or modified use should be basically the owner notifying the sewer commission.
I also like the idea of having a meter outboard so we know what's going out.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is you know, you do have shallow groundwaters. I don't know what the final design of the tanks are. So it's not just metered consumption. You can base your use billing on metered consumption, but I think you need basically something at the end of the pipe to exactly tell you what's coming into the system, because that's what's going to have the impact on the pump station and downgrading facilities.
All right. Well, we can figure out where to put it, I suppose.
Yeah, but I think that's not a big deal, but I think it's an important thing that,
Yeah, I mean, once you meter, then you can make your adjustments each year. If you wanted to make the annual adjustments that Bill had talked about, or review something annually, having the water department put those separate meters in would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times if they're going to have a pumping station, most likely they will because of the depth of everything. If they have a central pump station, you can put a mag meter on the end and basically meter the flow that way. Fairly accurate measure. It's basically instantaneous, so you can make readings. You know, all I would say is, you know, they put in some type of digital recorder, so the data is recorded and can be reviewed by the sewer commission.
Yeah, I think that that there is a water meter on the sprinkler system already. So
I'm surprised those numbers were never presented to demonstrate.
yeah, I don't know when the meter was put in.
So the motion that's before the three of us is accepting the Title V and issuing the $250,000 credit over the 20 years with a betterment and the 50% share. So it seems like we're still there.
And I would add to that a 20% deposit, 50% share.
Deposit, yeah, that's right.
I would ask on the 20% deposit, that is an issue because we're constructing the line. That's an issue that might be difficult for the developer to adhere to. And I think that, you know, as far as the impact that this extension would have on the sewer system in general probably could be mitigated by basically the payment of water that's being put into the system as any other taxpayer, you know, contributes. So if I would ask the board to be considerate of that particular issue, since we're outlaying the cost for the line at the outset.
Yeah, I mean, I think you outlined in your last letter regarding, you know, that the existing rules and regulations have a provision in there basically where impacts to the existing system would be paid for by the connecting party. And we also, in our agreement, draft agreement, we had some language in there that basically said that you would be responsible to basically for the cost for us to evaluate the downgrading facilities and for any repairs that were necessary from the downgrading facilities in order to accept your flow. And that was viewed, at least in the agreement, as something outside of the payment because it's an unknown. So that's something for the board to I guess, consider or evaluate at this point too, whether or not that additional cost to upgrade the system, and there will be costs to upgrade the system. We know we just had an overflow at the Veteran Station. We had some mechanical issues there. It's an old station. It does need upgrade before this flow comes in, and we're going to need to try to accelerate that based upon their timeline. And also the downgradient collection system, you know, has also deteriorated over time, and we'll need to evaluate that. So there will be some upfront costs to repair that station and get that station up to snuff to accept this flow as well as the collection system. And where does that money come from? So
it comes from the one, last I checked, it comes from the 1.4, and
Yeah.
the 1.4 and the betterment doesn't start. The betterment doesn't start until the system is completed, and then it goes into the fall tax bill. So the first payment the sewer department would receive would be at that point. So any cost that the town incurs prior to that, the applicant's required to pay those costs.
right. The question,
according to what we have here. So then the question is, if he's paying for all the costs through the whole construction of the project that the town incurs, and then when he turns the system on, the betterment begins where he starts paying the 1.4. Then the question is, if we wanted that 20% deposit to cover costs, what cost would it be covering?
But that's exactly the issue. Is that's what the betterment is for? Is to in theory, to reimburse the town for its costs of infrastructure and to maintain the system moving forward. That's the whole concept behind the fee. And so we would start paying that. That's where that money would come from. In the draft agreement that that we had previously been talking about since last year, there were two provisions for deposits. One was a $10,000 deposit, I believe, and the other was and that would go towards an evergreen peer review situation. And the other was, I believe, a $25,000 deposit. If you want to keep the $25,000 deposit, that's fine. It just appears to me that the $250,000 deposit is kind of an arbitrarily selected number. But we would agree, I think it's fair to have a deposit. I just think that, anything more than, I guess I would be questioning if you already have a provision that pays for inspections and monitoring, a provision that indicates that the developer is responsible for the costs of the impacts on the system. That's all there. So then the question really becomes is, why have the fund, or how much of the fund, in addition to whatever you're getting for your betterment, which in theory is to go to that, is, what's a fair number? And I don't think 250 just seems to me to be a very high number for a fund like this.
Yeah, if I could just add, when we started this, if we want to take the Wayback Machine almost 3 years ago, we had basically, I think that 20% was in there, but also that the full betterment was going to be paid within a certain, like a much shorter period of time. I don't remember what it was, but it was probably under 5 years. And so we've extended that out 20. And so that means we don't have access to all of that money. We're not getting that. So, if we have all these costs, and it's, I think it's typical. I am in the construction industry to a certain percent, but typically in a project like this, you get a deposit of something like 15 to 20% to start, so that we know that things are going to continue. And I'm going through all of the agreements that we have had going back to March of 11. And
we haven't had any agreements.
Well, I'm just the ones that the one that came to us has agreement on it, so that's what I'm using here. So they all have a percentage in there of some sort, and so I think that I'd be willing to go down to 15, but no more than that. We got we've been, again.
Can I mention one of the things in the back of my mind has been when we receive your plans of how you're going to do this from Vertex or whoever you're using, Tetra Tech, there may be things that we would want that really shouldn't be paid for by the developer putting in the line, that would benefit the town, the sewer department, and reduce costs in the future. That I was thinking that maybe if we had some money from this fund, we could give that money to the developer to do the things that we would want that would make things better without having to put it onto him. For instance, he's going to be doing one or two crossings going across the highway. And in fact, he may be putting in manholes that we may say, listen, put a stub in for a future connection here later on, so that that person doesn't have to go into the highway layout to put in to put a stub into that property. We didn't do that on the Little Harbor project, and on vacant land that after the thing was done, the developer had to go into the roads, tap the main, and that's where we had problems resulting in the way that that was done. And all of a sudden we had breaks, and that wasn't the right thing. I think that I wasn't on the board when that was being done, but I think vacant land should have a stub brought to it if you're going to put sewer down a street. So, but is it up to the person paying to put the sewer down the pipe to pay that? But if we don't have any money, then we can't do anything like that. And so we're not looking at the long range picture ourselves by trying to cheapen something on this end here. And the way it's getting cheapened is, all right, we're going to pay you over 20 years, no interest, no nothing. And what does $12,000 or $20,000, or $5,000 a quarter do when you're dealing with something that, is in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range? That's just my personal opinion, and I haven't discussed that with the board or anything in the future, but I just know, there's going to be some agreements or disagreements when we get the plans of how Mr. Stasko wants to do the project. And we can say, do duct a line going across the street and use C900 or something going down the things, so we have a thick wall sewer pipe. But someone might say, oh, I want the SDR 35 because that's what you've used in other parts of the town. And in fact, when we did use that in other parts of the town, we had problems in the future.
So the 15% would be allocated towards the unforeseen expenses that are going to be incurred, of things that we're going to have to adjust as a sewer department once he starts to make the hookup.
I think it's going to be, as soon as we get the plans, we're going to have an idea of what. Just face it. If I was the developer, I'm going to say, listen, I just want to do a pipe from here to here. What you guys do with it later is up to you. And in fact, we're going to say, if what we're going to do later is going to cost and may even be prohibitive or not be possible because of changes in regulations from the state highway. Oh, we just resurfaced that. You can't touch it for 10 years. And we weren't smart enough to do it when we had the permit to get down the road. So Paul, you are right. That's part of my intent. For instance, I've asked and said, I think the board should really look at running the pipe down to Sawyer Street. And the developer has said to me that that's going to cost me $250,000. And because I have to do this, this, and this, that seems like a greater amount of money than the balance of the area. But is that something that the town, or us, would rather see? But we can't do it if we want to, because we don't have the money to do it. And we'd have to go to town meeting. We'd have to do all these other things, where this way it's a matter of, making something work that's best for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a fund for like unforeseen circumstances that we want to do is
yeah, because at best we'd get 70,000 a year, and that 70,000 would come to us 4 times a year. It would broken into 4 payments based on the standard calculation of just the 1.4. So if we did have some unforeseen issues, then we only have the $70,000 cushion to use.
Yeah.
So right now, what's in front of us now is the further amending of the motion, which is the privilege fee using Title V, the betterment over 20 years, a deposit now of 15%, the housing credit of $250,000 over 20 years, and the 50% share of hookup.
Might I, if I could jump in, is this discussion is illuminating on I understand where the board is coming at with respect to a fund, and so what I'd like to ask the board to consider would be a specific number, and I think $100,000. I'd like to propose $100,000 as the fund to be deposited at the time of activation and credited against the betterment itself.
If I could add in as well, I think, first of all, we people keep on saying betterment. It really isn't a betterment. It's an assessment or an impact fee
Okay.
associated with the
yeah.
extension. And one thing too, something you said, Wayne, was interest free. I think the town is required to assign a minimum interest rate on that as well.
We are,
It's whatever the tax assessor, I think.
right.
does.
Whatever the prevailing is, it's
But
automatic.
Getting back to the upfront costs, based upon, again, we haven't done the evaluation of the downgrading facilities yet because we haven't got to that stage yet. But, based upon a preliminary evaluation of the conditions at the existing pumping station, the force main discharge manhole and some of the downgrading components, I would say that you're going to be at least $100,000 into this as far as rehab work for the system in order to allow the connection. And you're going to have to do that before the connection is activated, before the connection is made. So there really does need to be upfront spending in order to accommodate that flow. Otherwise, you're going to have overflows and problems with that pumping station. So at least $100,000 would be, in my mind, probably an essential minimum.
Right, but we also don't know what we don't.
Yes.
We also don't know on that line what we don't know.
You still have a provision in the agreement that indicates that we would pay those costs. So in addition to the $100,000 in the fund, you have the obligation to pay those costs, and you also have you're also getting the betterment. So when you combine the three, it's 100,000 is fair. I mean, look, we're putting in the line, the town is getting the benefit of that in the fee and in the water charges. So I would just encourage the board to look at it. Maybe we could factor in a provision that requires periodic review of that issue.
So Jeff, just a point of clarification.
To start with a periodic review, maybe.
If I can ask a question, Jeff, did you say that the sewer department will be paying for any changes, repairs, or anything of that line?
No, what I said is we have a draft agreement that indicates that that the developer is to reimburse the board the reasonable and necessary costs for work as a result of any impacts on the system, right? But we also have a separate provision that requires that we're talking about right now, $100,000 into a fund for that purpose, and then we're paying the betterment and the water fees, and the town is not paying for any of the line in the street. So when you combine all of that, along with maybe kind of a provision that requires an annual review, or maybe a quarterly review of the impacts in order to reassess the fund, I'm thinking something like that might be reasonable for the board to consider.
Well, just as a point also that the water go, we have two enterprise funds here. So basically it doesn't go to the town, it'll go to the water enterprise fund or the sewer enterprise fund. And so we just have to, I mean, as long as anything, any issues on that line are going to be paid by the developer, 100, I mean, if you think, Dan, 100 grand is sufficient, maybe we make it 150 or something, because we don't know what we don't know.
Right. But we know, just on a preliminary base, how bad some of the valving is at the pumping station, some of the piping and controls. It's rusted out to some degree, so some rehab has to be done on the station, as well as the receiving manhole at the end of its force main has been deteriorated. So we know that at a minimum, and I think 100,000 for the rehab work is not something unreasonable. It could be even more. And the question is that a separate payable item? Because that needs to be paid upfront in order for the work to be conducted.
Well, that's an idea. Maybe we do the 100,000 right now, but if it comes up, through our, due diligence of what it's going to cost, that is reimbursed to the sewer board.
Yeah, I mean, and to cover what Wayne was saying, if he is going to be dropping service connections along the way, that there's a cost involved with that too. So I mean, yeah.
So the 100,000 up front, and then he pays as those costs come in, Dan. So we're getting reimbursed. I don't know what the town has, terms of 30 days or 60 days or whatever it is to pay the bill. We would be getting it technically up front as opposed to quarterly over time.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that as long as as long as the sewer ratepayers aren't paying for it. That would be, I'm good.
All right, so the motion now, which has been amended again, is using Title V, the 20-year betterment, a deposit of 100,000, in addition to whatever deposits and fees that have been already agreed to, and then the housing credit of 250,000 over 20 years, and then the hookup share of 50%. So that's the motion that's on the floor.
I will second it.
Any further discussion?
You're asking for a motion with a group of things. Are we voting, or is your motion including all of the rest of the stuff that's in the form, or just those individual specific items?
So we're voting on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items that are the foundation of an agreement that the agreement would then have to be executed with the additional terms and conditions that we don't currently have in front of us. I know that in speaking with the finance director, he has to work on the language for what we vote on. So those would have to be in the agreement. And I think Rod has reviewed what has been sent to us, what has been done on Jerusalem Road, which we know has seemed to have worked out for the town as far as agreements in the past. We have the one that we've already drafted. So I think we've all seen what's in the agreement. I think it's a matter of voting on these 5 foundations of the agreement, and then ironing out the details that are really defined in our rules and regulations that were published in September of 2000.
Okay, so give me the 5 in order that you want that your motion is going to say. Number 1.
Number 1 is the privilege fee is calculated by using Title V.
As determined in
there was a attachment to,
as determined in the
there was an attachment that was submitted
A.
by, yep.
Okay. Let me just grab it.
And that will also have a periodic adjustment, right?
Right, no, that's separate, but go ahead. Title V. All right, number 2.
So number 2 is there would be a deposit of $100,000 in addition to any other fees that were already paid.
Do we want to make that there was $20,000 received by the applicant with the application?
It's not part of the 20. The 20 is separate. So this is $100,000 in addition to whatever's been paid.
Yeah, that's the application fee.
So this is a deposit of the privilege fee, right?
Correct.
Okay, let's make that sure.
And
3.
then, there would be a housing credit of 250,000.
Mhm.
And
That we
the
pay.
housing credit would, right, the housing credit would be applied over a 20-year betterment.
Yep.
So there is a betterment over 20 years for the whole fee.
Again, I don't think this is a betterment, Paul, just for
I know it's not a betterment. I'm only using the word as betterment right now.
Okay.
I did talk with with the assessor's office, and I did talk with the finance office, both of them today. For the sake of this conversation, I'm just using the word betterment because that's what the municipal people are used to seeing on a 20-year payout schedule. When in fact, this won't be a betterment. It'll more than likely be a agreement or a contract between the town and CJC.
I just want to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are correct, Dan. Yeah, it's not. I was trying to get that ironed out this morning, so it would be it would be paid over 20 years, and then there's a hookup share of 50%.
That is that's a part of 4.2, or is that number 5?
That's number 5.
Okay.
So just to run down them real quick, it's the Title V. It's the payment over 20 years, deposit of 100,000, the housing credit of 250 over 20 years, and the 50% hookup.
Paul, what can you explain the last one, the 50% hookup? You might have
Reimbursement.
Yeah, well, if somebody, that's the savings, if whatever the charge is, you get 50% of it.
Yeah. Paul, this is Bill. The only thing, and I think the vote's great. The only two things I'd add to that is one, in addition to that vote, that the board is accepting the application. 2, that they're voting the sewer connection subject to those 5 conditions. And lastly, it's subject to agreement on final language in the agreement. And I think that covers everything.
I had a question on the 50% reimbursement. Is there a cap on that?
So it's over 20 years.
Okay, but no monetary cap.
Yeah. So no, it's not a monetary. It was anyone who hooks up over the next 20 years, I believe, is what's in the original agreement.
Correct.
Up to 50% of what the expenses were.
Right.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I think that we have to, I don't see voting on these 5 points that I think we've pretty much all agreed to so far versus having it in a format that they can proceed. And I guess the 2 things is, will we review the application of the applicant? Well, the answer to that is yes. And secondly, because we can't even and we would deposit that $20,000 so in fact we can review the application. I don't and the Title V thing, yes. And the credit, yes. And I think this other language though is what you know, the insurances and the fact that you know, we're reviewing the plans and we have the rights to do certain things. I don't know how we're moving forward other than the fact, okay, we agree on the 1.4 million. We went down.
If I could just interject one thing on the agreement end of things. The one that is currently being referenced is the one on Jerusalem Road. That was a planned expansion of the sewer commission, just done ahead of the sewer commission doing the work. It was also in the district, and primarily it was a shared service, except for a small extension on the town's roadway. It's different in my mind, in nature and in beast, as far as that from a sewer extension outside the district. In terms of using that agreement, I think, and just relying upon general references in the rules and regulations, I think that puts some ambiguity into the agreement, and I think that might cause you problems down the road. My general recommendation is to go back to Rod's format with these points, just to make sure that all points are covered and that they're properly clarified for everybody. Everybody understands, you know, the implications of each, and proceed on that.
So I would add that, and to Wayne, to your point, I would think that what we want to do is vote on these 5 deal points and put them in a box and say, okay, we're done with it. And then let there be a sort of A to A session that finalizes the exact language. When that comes before the board in a week, say, then we can vote on the entire privilege agreement and the application, and then we'll be done with it. That's what I would recommend.
I think that's fair, Bill. That's fair.
Okay, so the motion in front of us is for those 5 elements to be the core foundation of an agreement that will be published for the board to vote on. And that vote of that agreement will include the acceptance of the application. And that's the motion we have.
Well, the one thing, this is Bill, that I might say, you may want to vote to accept the application so that you can use the money for the review you need to do now.
Only a week.
Yeah, I would say let's hold off. I would rather do them both at the same time. And because I don't know if we've gotten plans and all that stuff yet, but
Oh, yeah, the plans were submitted.
okay.
I
So
think we should,
yeah.
I think we should take it because we are, if it's not what, if the application is not correct, it's either got to be corrected or it's rejected or it's approved. So, and I think I agree with the attorneys that we're just, time is going by before Donald is telling his engineers, okay, finish the drawings and present them.
I mean,
Because I think, right,
maybe
is that
one way-
done? Are they in, Dan, are they in the information that they've given us already?
is what in, sorry.
Everything you need for an application for the extension of the sewer and the plans for what they're going to put in, is that in the application? Has anybody looked at it?
No.
No. So we don't know what's in the
Put in
application.
The application and review has been put on hold.
Is it important?
One thing that might help to expedite it, Wayne, was, I mean, maybe Rod can just put a quick letter together, a letter of intent to execute the agreement that could be signed by the developer, because that's really the only thing that's really missing from the application. That and the application itself was on a residential form and not the commercial form. But that's, you know, that's something that could be rectified fairly quickly, I would think. But I think the submission was really missing that letter of intent to execute the agreement.
Jeff DeLisi here. I just, I think that time is really important here. And one of the reasons that I had indicated in my letter, there's a date of September 1st, which these affordable units could be counted into the affordable housing inventory. I just think that a letter of intent to get an agreement. I think that we vote on these points. Let's get together the final agreement to be submitted to the board in 2 weeks and get it over with. To me, that's important for the town. I noticed that Steve Gomer is on the phone, and he could certainly weigh in. I think he's Affordable Housing Trust on the importance of getting this done quickly. We've been at this for some period of time. We have 2 draft agreements. I would imagine that the final agreement would be pretty much an amalgam of both. But at the end of the day, you have a set of sewer regulations that give you all sorts of abilities and rights to deal with this project and manage it. It's not just the agreement, it's also those regulations. As issues arise, you're going to be reviewing this, Dan, as we move along in the process. The plans, I'm sure the plans are going to be revised based on your recommendations, but we have submitted plans, we have submitted an application, we did pay the fee. I've disagreed with the concept of not recognizing the application and instead having this conversation without that. I think we need to vote to accept the application, to give the connection subject to these 5 points and a final agreement, which we would present next meeting in 2 weeks.
Mr. Chairman, may I add some color to the timing?
Sure.
For the record, Steve Gomer, Chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust. At this point, and based upon census results, the town is anywhere between 14 and 20 units short of the 10% threshold required for 40B compliance. The town has absolutely no hope of meeting that before September 1 without acceptance of this project. And as you all are very well aware, This project in turn can only go forward under a tight tank until that line is built, if that line is built. So without the project whatsoever, the town is open to 40B for the foreseeable future, because there's no likelihood of adding what are to be counted as 25 subsidized housing inventory units. There's just no chance of getting them. So there is an urgency here, and the concept behind the structure of affordable housing development in the town of Cohasset is to retain the control of that affordable housing development within the local community and not cede it unwillingly to an outside developer who can then force a much larger scale project upon us. You have it within your abilities at the moment to accept the application contingent upon agreement with your principals, agreement with prevailing laws and the commission's own regulations, and as you pointed out, draft a final language. So you can accept an application contingent upon those provisions, and I encourage you to do so, ostensibly from a very selfish viewpoint, and that is to maintain control over affordable housing development in the town, as opposed to ceding it. We've already seen what it can do. I would argue that Avalon has been a better than expected partner, but nonetheless, there is no doubt that there are substantial impacts on the quality of life in the town based solely on traffic, as well as use of our emergency responding services and so forth. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I encourage your action today.
So in reference to the application, accepting the application, it's not granting permission for the sewer line. Wayne, you had talked about accepting the application, so it would give us an opportunity to review the plans. And in reviewing those plans, there may be something in there that would have to go into the agreement, perhaps, or not.
Yes, my point is, the agreement isn't just these 5 points. The
Correct.
agreement is more than that.
Right.
Okay. And so I don't want this to be, the only thing that we're going to look at are these 5 points. And so we can do it in this 2-page agreement.
No. That's why I think clarified it, that these are deal points that have basically been the stick in the ground that have been keeping us from progressing.
Right.
So
These
are
just some of the deal points.
It's some of the deal points, but there are others that are within the 5 deal iterations that I have on my desk
We
here.
don't have to change these particular ones.
Right. So we could vote to accept the application. That would give us the ability to have Mr. Coughlin review the plans with the board, while Rod Hoffman is negotiating the other 5 provisions. So anything that we go through in discovery may be amended to the agreement.
I mean, one thing you could do just to play it safe is basically you could accept the application contingent upon the execution of agreement of the format previously proposed by town council or as may be amended. So at least that way you've established a bottom line, which was Rod's original agreement. And it's still subject to, additional negotiation or amendment, but, the application acceptance contingent upon that.
I have a concern with using that basis of an agreement just from the standpoint of, excuse me, we've been talking about these 5 points, but there's other language in that agreement that I felt kind of went beyond the typical, the stated language of your sewer regulations. And my concern is that we might be back at this talking about that language, whereas the language that was utilized, and Dan, to your point, in the draft agreement that I had set forth, was based upon the 465 Jerusalem, and it was a different deal. But then adding these 5 points makes that deal specific to this. And so that's why I think that it's that agreement that was drafted years ago, which served as the basis of what I sent along, basically deferred to your sewer regulations and didn't try to overstep outside of it. And so that's why I wanted to use that agreement.
I understand that, but again, this is outside the district, so the commission does have the right to impose additional criteria, for this in order to make sure that its impacts are minimized. So I
could just foresee arguing about other language, but
and
I defer to the board.
That would be a concern for the board, because the board has read Rod's agreements in the past, the past versions, and if you have specific issues in that agreement, then maybe we should discuss that with the board.
And I think the point is, for a year, we never got any response on the language that we put in the agreement.
There was never a pending hearing, and I think I went over the reasons why, but I don't want to bring this down into. I don't want to digress off of.
Yeah. So right now we have a motion from the chair for the 5 items: the Title V, the 20-year betterment, the $100,000 deposit, the housing credit of $250 over 20 years, and the 50% hookup share fee. So if there's no further discussion, we should probably take a roll vote on that.
Yep.
Now, if we're at capacity and we have to send some flow to Hull, are they going to pay the extra amount?
That was the original plan, yes.
But
And that was actually mentioned. That was actually mentioned at Wellcock Commons.
Okay. Is that considered another point that would not come up?
It is, because it's not part of the original draft agreement or the draft agreement that proposes. So,
but it is in the one that we had proposed, that I had drafted.
Except that it's at 115% as opposed to the fee. So in other words, of course, we understand that we would pay that rate if you're at capacity and have to go to Hull or Hingham. But why should we have to pay 115%?
Because the sewer commission is maintaining an asset that you are transferring to them. They have to maintain that system. Where does the money come from in order to maintain that system when they're taking the fee and just turning it over to Hull?
From your betterment and from the water fees that you're collecting.
No,
and
again,
we don't keep the water fees.
There is no water fees. It's a sewer fee, and if it's at the same rate as they pay Hull, essentially there is no money to maintain that system.
I'm just bringing up the point. I would urge the board to vote on these points today.
Yeah, but these are not the only points that are going to be in the agreement. That's the point.
That's understood. Bill, the only last question for your motion: do you want to accept the application so that you can use the 20,000 so that your engineers can review the stuff now?
I had opened that up for discussion about accepting the application. We are in agreement to accept the application and use the 20,000 to review the plans that were submitted, and then upon discovery of any issues in that, it would be part of the agreement. So accepting the application would be contingent on the agreement.
That's okay. I think that makes sense.
So the motion that we have in front of us right now is our 6 items, which is the privilege fee of Title V calculations, their betterment over 20 years, the deposit of $100,000 is additional to whatever fees have been assessed already, the housing credit of $250,000 over 20 years, the hookup share fee of 50%, and the accepting of the application contingent on a final executed agreement.
And again, to address Wayne's points, I'm not sure if you want to reference which agreement we're talking about.
So, well, it's going to be any agreement we have with CJC. I don't know what Rod Hoffman, I haven't heard from you much today. What would you like to call it?
Well, hearing what I'm hearing, I will begin with the commission approved connection agreement and add, incorporate these deal points.
Okay, so accepting the application would be contingent on the connection agreement, is what you're calling.
Yeah, the connection
Okay.
agreement.
Okay,
But I again, I just want to make certain that we have these 5 deal points. We have an agreement that we're starting with, but that the expectation is that the language of that agreement is subject to final approval, including language that is in addition to the 5 business points that you're discussing, right? So in other words, Robert,
Correct.
you just said almost sounds like everything in the agreement, which was previously approved by the commission, which I take issue with because it was not previously approved by the commission. I never heard any vote, but I just want to make certain that we have the ability to talk to you and suggest any reasonable changes to the remainder of that document in addition to these 5 points.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's what I would expect too.
Yep. Okay.
That was my understanding of the instruction from the last meeting, that the lawyers would get together, but instead, you didn't respond to what I did. You had submitted.
My response was your other agreement. Exactly. We pretty much crossed agreements the same day, same hour.
so with that motion, is there a second?
I will second it.
So we have a roll call vote.
Fire away.
Paul Kearsey, aye.
Bill McGowan, aye.
Wayne Sawchuck, aye.
Thank you very much.
So now that we have approved we have accepted the application contingent on the connection agreement. And within that connection agreement, we have agreed on the principles of Title V, calculations of 20-year betterment, deposit of $100,000, housing credit of $250 over 20 years, and the 50% share of hookup fees over 20 years.
And any other issues that come up.
Correct.
Okay.
And the next meeting is
How about a year from now? I'm tired.
September 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one would be July 6th, is a Tuesday.
Yeah, that
We
might
talked
be
about Wednesday the 7th, right? Because
because of July 4th. I think.
we needed to rest after the 4th of July weekend.
No, I can't do it I could do it Wednesday after 10:30.
Right now, I'm open on Wednesday. I might be traveling, but I don't know yet. So, I mean, you want to say Wednesday at 11 a.m.?
Yeah.
Sure, Wednesday at 11
Are
a.m.
we talking the 7th or the 14th?
The 7th.
Now we're gonna have to get together and get some correspondence back and forth between.
Yeah, I'll be on top of that. This will be my #1 issue this week.
Good.
Okay, so just from an administrative standpoint, Lisa, since we've accepted the application, I believe we could deposit the $20,000 check and begin our review. Is that correct, Bill?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay. So the applicant knows that check will be cashed.
Okay,
Acceptance of the application isn't necessarily approval of the application.
right. It's just so that we can review it.
I would just generally recommend that the applicant also submit it on the commercial form that's available.
Right.
Yeah, Jeff, there's a commercial form that we have online. If we could just resubmit the commercial form.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I got to jump off.
Okay.
All right.
So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I have one last thing, and that is an invitation for the Tetra Tech people to communicate with John on the just to put the materials, et cetera, and how it's being done together so that as that review is going, it's going positively.
Yeah, I think it would be.
Work with Don or work with Dan? Oh, Dan. Okay, that makes sense to me. Sure. Yep.
Lisa, were
Okay.
there any other agenda items you wanted to address?
There was 30 Bayberry Lane that was on the agenda, and for 15 Brook Street. 15 Brook is postponed until a further notice. But the 30 Bayberry Lane, Chapella Road, pump station issue, I did send the contents of the file via email right before this meeting, though.
You're looking just to inform the board about that, or are you looking for action?
I wasn't looking for action. I didn't know if we needed to discuss it or not.
I read it and I thought that we should just have the plant operator take care of it. Whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, it does speak to the fact that work needs to be done at that station. Basically, we had system failures and it resulted in an overflow condition.
Okay.
All right. And
That it? Motion to adjourn now?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Paul Kear, second.
Wayne Sawchuk.
All right, Bill Magano. Okay, see you guys. Have a good 4th of July.
Fourth, yeah.
All right, thanks for your efforts.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Thanks for everything. All right, bye-bye.